So picture this. It is 2 o'clock in the morning. You are recovering from some kind of surgery.
Oh, that is the worst feeling. Just the physical discomfort alone.
Right. The pain is keeping you awake.
Yeah.
And the rest of your house is pitch black. Everyone else is fast asleep. And you are just staring up at the ceiling, wide awake, dealing with this intense physical discomfort. So you reach over to the nightstand and you grab your phone.
Naturally, it's what we all do, right?
Exactly. And in your hand, you have infinite access. I mean, you have thousands of contacts. You have these limitless feeds of breaking news, literally millions of hours of streaming video. Plus, you have an algorithm that is, designed specifically to feed you exactly what you supposedly want to see.
A perfectly optimized machine just for you.
Completely. You are entirely globally connected to the entire human race. And yet, sitting there in the dark glow of that little screen, you are completely and utterly alone.
Yeah.
So today, we were looking at what might actually be the cure for that exact brand of modern isolation. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
It really is the defining paradox of our era, isn't it? I mean, we have engineered what is objectively the most hyper-connected society in all of human history. And yet, at the exact same time, we are suffering through this unprecedented epidemic of loneliness.
It's staggering when you actually stop and think about it.
It is, because we've completely solved the logistical problem of distribution, right? But we have entirely failed to solve the fundamental human need for actual presence.
And that is exactly the tension we are diving into today. Our source material for this deep dive is an essay published by Chesterton Radio. It is titled, "The Little Station on Commercial Street, Stories, Ideas, Wonder." And I have to admit, when I first saw the title, I totally assumed we were looking at, like, a standard business case study.
Oh, sure, like a breakdown of how an independent broadcaster survives today.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was going to be this technical breakdown of how a niche independent media company managed to carve out an audience in a landscape that is just completely dominated by these massive tech giants. But it is not a business plan at all.
Not even close.
No. It is this profound, just beautifully written reflection on what happens when media becomes a physical place, like a space built around old stories, deep ideas, and the actual cultivation of wonder.
And what I love about it is that it does not approach this topic from some detached academic tower. It uses a hyper-specific, grounded location to essentially diagnose the condition of the modern digital soul.
Yeah, it gets incredibly local.
Very local. The author is basically arguing that the cure for this strange loneliness of our digital age is completely counterintuitive to everything that, Silicon Valley teaches us about. Scale and efficiency and content creation.
Right, so our mission today is to pull this entire philosophy apart. We are going to explore the critical difference between the content we are just drowning in every day and the genuine companionship we are actually starting for.
Which is a huge distinction.
It is massive. We need to figure out why a physical storefront in a small Kansas town actually matters to a global internet audience. We're going to look at why old stories have this weird power to bridge generations, and how a slow, deliberate sense of wonder might genuinely be the only viable antidote to a media landscape that is, frankly, designed to keep our nervous systems completely on edge.
Yeah, a landscape that basically runs on our anxiety.
Totally. Reading this essay, it completely shattered my assumptions about what media is actually supposed to do.
It definitely forces a massive reevaluation of the core metrics we use to measure value in our lives. And the author starts by dropping us right into the physical environment of this station.
It's such a vivid opening.
It really is. It's downtown Atchison, Kansas, which is this old river town situated right in the Missouri River Valley. And the essay draws a really sharp, very intentional contrast between what that town feels like during the day versus what happens when the sun finally goes down.
Yeah, the atmosphere the author paints is just incredible. You can practically smell the wet pavement. It's this rainy summer evening. And the author points out that during the daytime, Commercial Street is entirely defined by its name, right?
Yeah.
It's all about commerce.
Efficiency and utility.
Exactly. You have delivery trucks idling. You have shop owners out there sweeping the sidewalks, people just rushing from errand to errand beneath these really beautiful century brick facades. The daylight hours emphasize function. The buildings are businesses, and the streets are just these vectors to get you from point A to point B as fast as humanly possible.
And that function and utility, those are the driving forces of modern life everywhere, really. We prioritize them above absolutely everything else. But the essay suggests that when the sun goes down, and specifically on this rainy evening they describe, that whole utilitarian framework just dissolves.
The vibe completely shifts.
totally shifts. The wet brick streets start reflecting the street lamps. The marquee of the old Fox Theater down the block is casting this red and gold light across the puddles. You've got the courthouse clock tower up on the hill, and it's just marking the time, completely unbothered by whatever the current cultural obsession happens to be.
I love that image. It's just steady.
Right, it's steady. And the author calls this the return of an older magic. And right in the middle of this dark, quiet street is the brightly lit, narrow storefront of Chesterton Radio.
The way the inside of this storefront is described, it is so fascinating. Because it's almost designed to scramble the modern brain's need for categorization.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you look through these large front glass windows, and it is not a traditional bookstore, even though it's completely lined with bookshelves.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not a museum, even though you can see antique radios and an old turntable sitting there.
Right. It defies those neat little labels.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not a sterile broadcasting studio either. There is a glowing red on-air sign in the corner, but the desk itself is just covered in this uncalculated clutter. You know, coffee mugs, loose notes, stacked books, authors like G.K. Chesterton, obviously, but also C.S. Lewis, J.R. Tolkien, Hilaire Belloc.
The heavy hitters of that era.
Yeah. And the text says something really profound here. It says, nothing matches, yet everything belongs.
Oh, that phrase, nothing matches, yet everything belongs. That is a crucial architectural and philosophical point for this whole essay.
Because it's the opposite of what we expect today.
Exactly. Think about modern retail design or even modern studio design. Every single element is highly calculated to project a very specific brand identity. It's slick, it's minimalist, it's frictionless. It is explicitly designed to move you through the transaction funnel as efficiently as possible.
Or to look perfect for an Instagram post.
Right, it's curated for optics. But the interior of Chesterton Radio possesses the kind of order that only emerges organically after years of genuine human use. It visually communicates a complete rejection of efficiency.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for a second here. Let me push back on this.
Go for it.
If their audience is primarily digital-like, if we have people streaming this broadcast in Australia or Yorkshire or driving cross-country on an interstate, isn't paying rent on a physical storefront in a small Kansas town just objectively terrible business?
From a purely spreadsheet perspective, sure.
Right. I mean, why bother with the physical space at all? Why not just run this whole operation out of a basement or a spare bedroom? It seems like an entirely unnecessary overhead cost if the end product is just audio being beamed over the internet.
That is the logical question. But the essay argues that the physical space is actually the anchor. In a digital world, an algorithm can spin up an endless stream of AI-generated audio in a fraction of a second. It costs nothing, and frankly, it means nothing.
Because it has no stakes.
Exactly. No stakes. The essay argues that the physical reality of the station, the rent being paid, the actual brick walls, the rain hitting the glass, the literal dust on those bookshelves, that proves to the listener that the broadcast is driven by human affection, not by code. The physical space dictates the entire ethos of the broadcast itself.
Wait, how does the room dictate the broadcast? I mean, does a microphone actually sound different if it's in a cluttered storefront versus a sterile, soundproof booth?
It doesn't change the acoustics, but it changes the posture of the person speaking into it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Think about it. If you are sitting in a windowless, soundproofed room, and you have a giant monitor in front of you showing a spreadsheet of real-time engagement metrics, your broadcast naturally becomes transactional. You are producing content for a demographic target.
You're performing for the metrics.
Yes. But if you are sitting at a cluttered wooden desk, and you are looking out a large glass window at the rain falling on Commercial Street, and you are literally watching your neighbor walk their dog past the Fox Theater, your broadcast inherently becomes conversational.
You're talking to a neighborhood, even if that neighborhood is global.
Exactly. The essay specifically points out that places that become meaningful often acquire an appearance of permanence. That permanence reassures the person listening. It basically says, we are really here. We are rooted in the physical world just like you are.
That actually brings up a fascinating dynamic the essay highlights about how we interact with physical spaces today. Because we've lost that sense of permanence. There is this anecdote in the text about a young man who pushes open the door of the station a little after 7 o'clock on this rainy evening.
Oh, I love this part.
It's so telling, right? He brings the smell of the rain inside with him. He looks around the room, and he is visibly disoriented. He sees the warmly lit room, he sees all the books, but because there are no cash registers, no barcode scanners, and no obvious price tags anywhere, he actually has to ask the host, "Are you open?"
It is such a profound symptom of our modern condition.
It really is.
He does not see a clear mechanism for commerce, so he genuinely doubts whether he is even allowed to exist in that space. We have been so deeply conditioned to believe that our presence in any building outside our home must be justified by a financial transaction.
We absolutely have. Think about it. If you walk into a local coffee shop to meet a friend, and you don't immediately go to the counter and buy a $5 latte, you feel like a trespasser.
You feel the guilt. You're taking up a table.
Yes.
Yeah.
You feel like you're loitering. This young man in the station is looking around for the rules of engagement, and he can't find any. So the person behind the microphone just laughs and says, "We're always open."
Which completely disarms the situation.
It does. So the visitor wanders over, he picks up a copy of Chesterton's book, Orthodoxy, and they just start talking. And the conversation flows. They talk about Chesterton, then they move to C.S. Lewis, then Tolkien. They get into this really deep discussion about how modern society treats human imagination as an optional luxury rather than a fundamental necessity for survival.
And pay attention to the timeline of that specific interaction. The young man eventually looks at his watch. He realizes how late it is. He says he should probably get going. And then he ends up staying for another 20 minutes.
Yes. He lingers.
He lingers.
The lost art of lingering. The author points out that Chesterton Radio is one of those incredibly rare places left in the world where nobody is eager to hurry anyone else away, which honestly leads into a much broader and frankly somewhat tragic sociological observation that the essay makes about the extinction of unstructured spaces in our culture.
It's a huge loss. There's a sociologist named Ray Oldenburg who coined the term the third place.
Right, I've heard of this.
So you have your first place, which is your home. You have your second place, which is your workplace or your school. And historically healthy, functioning societies have relied heavily on the third place.
Like the local diner.
Exactly. The local diner, the neighborhood pub, the church basement, the corner bookstore, or honestly, even just the front porch of a house after sunset. These were places where people gathered without a specific agenda or a calendar invite.
The front porch is actually the perfect example. It used to act as this liminal space, right? This buffer zone between the private sanctum of your house and the completely public sphere of the street.
Yes. You didn't schedule a meeting on your porch.
No. You just sat out there with a glass of iced tea, and the neighborhood naturally happened around you. People walked by, they stopped, they chatted. It was this unstructured social serendipity.
But look at the architecture of modern life today. We have largely eliminated that middle ground entirely.
We really have. Now we just have the internet, which is aggressively, relentlessly public all the time.
Unforgivingly public.
Yeah. And then we have our locked houses, which are completely private, with the smart doorbell cameras making sure nobody comes near the porch. The third places have just evaporated. And the essay makes a really vital point here. This loss is hard to measure because the physical buildings might still be standing.
Right, the diners are still there.
Exactly. There's still diners and bookstores downtown. But the habits that animated those buildings are gone. The social permission to just enter a building without a strict utilitarian purpose has completely vanished.
And we traded all of that away for efficiency. The essay notes that modern life is exceptional at efficiency, but it actively punishes lingering.
Oh, it despises lingering.
It does. And this is entirely by design. We have optimized our environment so thoroughly that any kind of friction is treated as a systemic flaw. I mean, think about your smartphone. I can order a week's worth of groceries from my phone while I'm sitting at a stoplight, and they are waiting on my porch when I get home.
It's magic, basically.
It is. I can stream any movie ever made instantly. I don't have to navigate the social friction of making small talk with the video store clerk or waiting behind someone writing a check in the grocery store checkout line. It is flawlessly efficient.
Yet the psychological cost of that flawless efficiency is astronomical.
It's bankrupting us.
It really is. Convenience solved all of our logistical friction, sure, but it completely insulated us from serendipitous human contact. The essay diagnoses the end result of this hyper-efficiency with what I think is a chillingly accurate phrase. It says we are living through the strange experience of being connected to everyone while feeling accompanied by no one.
Connected to everyone, accompanied by no one. That is the exact paradox we started with at the top of the hour.
It perfectly describes the 2 a.m. feeling. If my car breaks down in the middle of the night, I have 1,000 social media followers in my pocket, but I probably don't have a single person I feel comfortable actually calling to come pick me up.
Right. You have an audience, but no companions.
Exactly. So, if modern convenience has successfully insulated us to the point of this profound isolation, how does a radio station broadcasting old media from a storefront in Kansas actually fix that? How is that a solution?
To understand the mechanics of the solution, the author actually takes us out of Atchison for a moment and takes us across the world to Yorkshire, England.
Okay.
This is where we return to that scenario you brought up at the very beginning. It is late at night in Kansas, and the station receives an email from a listener in Yorkshire. And this man had been recovering from a major surgery.
The physical vulnerability of that scenario is just so universally relatable. I mean, the pain makes sleep impossible. The silence of the house just amplifies the feeling of isolation.
You're trapped in your own body.
Yeah. And the essay notes that he tried watching television, but it had very little interest for him. TV was too flashy, too aggressive, too loud for his nervous system in that vulnerable state. But while he's searching around online in the dark, he stumbles onto an old American radio mystery streaming from Chesterton Radio.
And he listens to the entire episode. But the transformative part of the story, the thing that really matters, is what happens next.
He comes back.
He comes back the very next night, and the night after that. The broadcast becomes this reliable, steady presence in the middle of his disorientation. And when he finally writes an email to the station, his note ends with a sentiment that the author says they hear constantly from listeners. He writes, "It feels like somebody's keeping the light on."
Wow. Keeping the light on. It's such a powerful, almost protective image, isn't it?
It really is.
It implies that someone knows you're out there wandering in the dark, and they are actively holding a safe space open for you until you are finally ready to come in.
And here's the philosophical crux of the entire essay. The author makes a brilliant, vital distinction here. No modern media consultant, no Silicon Valley tech bro would ever advise a client to build a business model around keeping the light on for insomniacs.
They'd laugh you out of the room.
Right, because that doesn't scale. It doesn't generate massive targeted ad revenue. But that listener in Yorkshire was not writing in to say, hey, thank you for the content. He was expressing deep gratitude for companionship.
The difference between content and companionship. I really want to dig into this because I think this is the dividing line of modern media.
Absolutely.
Content is a commodity. It's all about information transfer, distribution metrics, algorithmic virality, how to monetize eyeballs. Content is something you consume, digest, and then immediately forget because there's an endless feed of it queued up right behind the last piece.
Precisely. Content is inherently transactional. Companionship, on the other hand, is relational. Companionship requires actual presence.
Right.
All the technological infrastructure of the radio station, the servers, the streaming bandwidth, the expensive microphones, there's all necessary utilities, sure, but they do not explain why a man in physical pain in England is deeply comforted by hearing a mid-century detective drama broadcast from a storefront in Kansas.
The text says it's because stories create a peculiar kind of company. But it clarifies that they don't do this by eliminating solitude.
Which is a massive distinction.
It is a really countercultural idea. We usually think of companionship as the exact opposite of solitude. If I have company, I am not in solitude. But the essay argues that stories create company by reminding us that solitude is not the same thing as isolation.
Yes. Solitude is a state of being alone, which can be deeply restorative and necessary for deep thought. Isolation is the terrifying feeling of being entirely disconnected from the human family.
That makes total sense.
When you are reading a rich, complex novel or listening to a beautifully crafted radio drama, you are physically in solitude. You are sitting quietly in a room by yourself, but you are definitively not isolated. Your mind is deeply engaged with another mind.
Okay, let me push back on the mechanics of that, though.
Yeah.
Because I hear the poetry in it, and it sounds beautiful, but if I am listening to a radio drama that was recorded in a studio in 1948, or if I am reading a book written by Charles Dickens in 1850, how is that actually companionship?
What's the holdup for you?
Well, I can't ask Charles Dickens a follow-up question. I can't interact with the actors on that old radio show. They're all deceased. I am literally just listening to a recording of ghosts. It's a completely one-way street. How does a one-way transmission constitute a real relationship?
That's a fair question. But it feels like a one-way street only if you view communication purely as the exchange of new real-time data.
Okay.
The essay reframes how we interact with art. When you engage with a truly great story, you are actively participating in an ongoing conversation. Cognitive psychologists refer to this as theory of mind, which is the human ability to attribute mental states, beliefs, and emotions to others.
Right, empathy, basically.
Yes. When you read Dickens, you are temporarily running his software on your brain's hardware. You are seeing the world through his exact perspective, feeling the moral outrage or the profound sorrow that he felt when he was writing it.
So even though the physical creator is gone, their consciousness is effectively resurrected in your mind for the duration of the story.
Yes. The physical participants in that conversation may be separated by decades or even centuries, but the conversation itself survives. The author of the essay puts it perfectly. They say old stories remain alive, not simply because they are old, but because they still speak.
They still have something to say.
Exactly. They still have something fundamentally true to say about human fear, human justice, human longing, and human wonder. The medium of the story is the bridge that allows your mind to connect with the mind of the creator across the massive chasm of time.
That drastically changes how I look at the physical books sitting on my shelf at home. They are not just decorative objects, and they aren't just blocks of data. They are dormant conversations just waiting for me to initiate them.
That's a great way to put it.
And if a story from 1948 or 1850 still speaks today, it completely changes how we should think about history itself. It totally challenges the arrogance of what C.S. Lewis called chronological snobbery.
Remind me how he defines that.
It's the uncritical assumption that newer is automatically better just because it is newer, that people in the past were just less evolved and we have all the right answers now. Which brings us to how the essay handles the entire concept of preservation.
This is a fantastic part of the essay, because we usually operate with a very passive, stale definition of preservation.
Right.
When we hear the word preservation, we immediately picture a museum archive. We picture some ancient, fragile artifact sitting behind bulletproof glass in a climate-controlled room where the temperature and humidity are monitored by computers.
It is preserved precisely because it is separated from human life.
Right. Please do not touch. That is our default cultural mode for saving the past. Lock it away in a vault. But the author argues that the deepest, most resilient forms of preservation are intensely active. The essay explicitly states that true preservation involves less dusting than sharing.
Because culture is a living organism, not a fossil.
Exactly. A story only survives the brutal passage of time if a living person chooses to tell it again today. A book only avoids oblivion because someone reads it, is deeply moved by it, and then physically presses it into the hands of a friend saying, "You have to read this."
A piece of sheet music only lives if a musician actually plays it.
Yes. The survival of a 1948 radio broadcast isn't dependent on the physical reel of magnetic tape degrading in some Hollywood vault. It survives because, decades later, someone sitting at a desk at Chesterton Radio decides it still has value, they broadcast it over the internet, and someone in Yorkshire decides to listen to it.
The preservation requires active, willing participation. And the essay uses a really brilliant anecdote to ground this whole abstract concept in the physical world. It introduces us to an Ohio machinist.
This is where the author brilliantly connects the preservation of ephemeral, invisible things like stories to the preservation of heavy, physical machinery.
I love this part.
So this listener is a retired machinist who spent 40 years working in heavy industry. He knows lathes, he knows mills, grinders, incredibly complex assembly equipment. And he writes emails to the station while he is out in his workshop behind his house, listening to the broadcast late at night.
And his emails aren't philosophical treatises on the nature of radio or media theory. He writes to the station about his physical projects. He talks about rescuing a massive old drill press from a scrapyard. Or he details the weeks he spent rebuilding a metal vise that had been left out in the weather and was completely rusted solid.
And the motivation behind his grueling work is the key detail here. He is not doing this to flip these tools on some online auction site for a quick profit.
Yeah.
He puts in hours and hours of manual labor because, according to the text, he genuinely believes these objects deserved another chance to do the work they had been designed to do.
That mindset, that belief in the dignity of the object, is a total fundamental rejection of the disposable culture we live in today.
It's radical, honestly.
It really is. We are entirely conditioned to favor replacement over restoration. If a toaster breaks, you don't take it apart and solder a new wire. You throw it in a landfill and you buy a new one that Amazon delivers the very next morning. If a phone gets slightly slow, you trade it in.
It's frictionless replacement.
Exactly. And the essay admits that, yes, replacement is almost always easier and faster, but it insists that easier and better are not synonyms.
When we treat the physical objects around us as inherently disposable, We slowly, unconsciously train our brains to treat everything as disposable.
Oh, man. That's true.
We do. We treat our attention as disposable. We treat our relationships as disposable. We treat the wisdom of the past as disposable.
Swipe left, right. Just discard it.
The machinist's dedication to that old drill press is a physical, sweaty manifestation of what Chesterton Radio is trying to do with old stories. He recognizes that some things acquire a deeper, more profound value precisely because they have endured. A well-made tool, a solid brick building, a deep friendship, a classic novel.
It's recognizing the inherent dignity of the thing. And to bring this full circle, the author relies on an engineering analogy. The essay points out that any good engineer understands that the machine itself is never the final achievement.
Right, the machine is just a means to an end. A municipal water system is an absolute marvel of engineering, but the steel pipes and the electric pumps are not the point. The point is that families living in a city have clean water to drink.
Right.
A massive automotive factory is just a complex arrangement of concrete and steel and electricity. Its actual value comes from the useful goods it produces for society. The machine is always, always a bridge to something else.
And the essay argues that stories operate on that exact same engineering principle. A novel or a radio drama is not the final destination. The story is the bridge.
Yes.
It is an engineered mechanism designed to facilitate connection. It bridges the gap between strangers. It bridges the gap between different generations. It bridges the terrifying void between our modern present anxieties and the accumulated wisdom of the past.
And it bridges the gap between individuals and their actual physical communities. The author brilliantly ties this massive, abstract idea back down to the literal brick streets of Atchison, Kansas. The text points out the Amelia Earhart banners that flutter above the sidewalks downtown.
Because Atchison is her birthplace.
Right. And the author makes the profound point that Amelia Earhart's story doesn't survive in that town just because there is a bronze plaque bolted to a wall somewhere. It survives because the children in the local schools are actively taught about her. The residents weave her history into their own civic identity. Her courage becomes part of the atmosphere of the place.
Which leads the author to write what might be the single most important sentence in the entire essay. I underlined this twice. Culture survives through affection.
Culture survives through affection. It is so simple, but it completely upends how we are taught to think about civilization.
It really does. We operate under the assumption that culture is preserved by massive, well-funded institutions. We think history is protected by government mandates and historical societies and billion-dollar university endowments and museum boards.
We outsource the preservation.
Yes. And while those things provide infrastructure, the essay argues that the foundation is entirely emotional. Beneath all the bureaucracy and the funding, human beings only preserve what they actually love.
It is the most democratic view of cultural preservation possible. Because bureaucracy can mandate a school curriculum, but only genuine affection can ensure a story is actually internalized by a student and passed down to the next generation.
Think about something as simple as a family recipe. Your great-grandmother's recipe for her-made bread doesn't survive 100 years because someone filed it at the Library of Congress.
No, it would be forgotten instantly.
Exactly. It survives because you loved your grandmother, you loved the taste of the bread, and you intentionally set aside a Saturday afternoon to teach your own children how to knead the dough. It survives through the physical act of affection.
It's the same with local places.
Right. The same is true for a neighborhood park. The city parks department can mow the grass every week, but the park only remains a beautiful, safe place to be if the neighbors love it enough to pick up the trash and watch out for each other's kids.
A local library only exists because a community loves books and fights for the funding. A local independent radio station only endures because a group of listeners believe its existence makes their lives richer. Affection is the irreplaceable engine of all preservation.
Okay, but this brings us to a massive, very practical problem.
What's that?
If culture survives only through affection, and if we only preserve the things we deeply, truly love, how are we supposed to cultivate that kind of slow, deep affection in a modern media landscape that is explicitly designed by thousands of genius engineers to constantly, relentlessly distract us?
It's an uphill battle.
It's like we are trying to plant an oak tree in the middle of a Category 5 hurricane.
That is the pivotal question of the digital age. And the essay tackles it head-on by drawing a hard, bright line between two fundamentally opposed modes of human interaction. The frantic pursuit of attention versus the slow cultivation of curiosity.
To illustrate the difference, the author introduces a third and final visitor to the station. It's late on an autumn evening, and a young woman comes through the door carrying a backpack and a notebook. She is a student at Benedictine College, which is a liberal arts college located right there in Atchison.
Right up the road.
Yeah. So she starts talking to the host, and she mentions that she heard the name G.K. Chesterton brought up during a class discussion that week. But she has the intellectual humility to admit, totally unashamed, I've never actually read him.
That simple admission, just saying, I don't know, but I want to, that is the absolute prerequisite for all genuine learning.
Exactly. If you pretend you know everything, you can't learn anything. So she browses the shelves, and she eventually leaves the station that night carrying a copy of Chesterton's book, The Everlasting Man. Several weeks go by, and then she comes back.
And she's ready to talk.
Oh, she is. The essay notes that she ends up staying for a conversation that lasts nearly an hour. The book had not neatly answered all of her questions. In fact, the author wisely points out that no truly worthwhile book ever ties everything up in a neat little bow.
A good book breaks things open. It doesn't close them down.
Right. So what the book had done was successfully awaken her curiosity.
Because one deep question immediately birthed 3 more questions. Her encounter with one author highlighted the existence of 5 other authors she suddenly realized she needed to read. The book acted as a key that unlocked a door into a vastly larger, far more complex intellectual landscape.
And the essay uses her experience to deliver what I think is a devastating critique of the modern internet. It states, the world contains countless systems designed to maximize attention. Far fewer are designed to cultivate curiosity.
We have to look at the physiological and psychological realities of those 2 words because they are definitely not synonyms. The attention economy is, at its core, a predatory system.
How so?
To capture human attention quickly and hold it, algorithms are designed to stimulate the limbic system. That's the primitive lizard part of our brain that is responsible for survival, fear, and raw emotion. That is exactly why outrage, anger, and anxiety perform so well online.
It's fight or flight.
Yes. They trigger a cortisol response in your body. You literally cannot look away from a perceived threat.
Attention is immediate. It is a reflex. You hear a loud noise in the room, you turn your head. That's attention. But curiosity, as the text argues, operates on a completely different timeline.
A much slower one.
Right. Curiosity unfolds slowly.
Yeah.
It doesn't spike your heart rate. It engages the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for deep thinking, reflection, and long-term planning. Attention produces immediate engagement metrics for advertisers. Curiosity produces long-term human growth.
It is the exact difference between a cheap sugar rush and a nutritious home-cooked meal. Our modern media diet largely consists of scrolling through thousands of 15-second videos that provide these constant tiny dopamine hits.
Just hit after hit after hit.
Exactly. It is purely a sugar rush. It leaves you exhausted, depleted, but completely malnourished. The essay is remarkably blunt about the reality of this landscape. It admits that calm is not generally regarded as a competitive advantage. If your goal is massive growth, excitement performs better. Urgency performs better. Outrage performs exceptionally well.
Let's address the harsh reality of that market dynamic, though. If algorithms reward outrage with millions of views and massive ad revenue, and they actively punish calm with low visibility, isn't prioritizing wonder and curiosity just terrible business?
Again, financially speaking, probably.
Right. I mean, Chesterton Radio's approach sounds beautiful, but in a hyper-competitive, cutthroat attention economy, isn't this just romantic nostalgia? Can a model built on slow, quiet wonder actually survive when it's competing against billion-dollar platforms engineered by behavioral psychologists to hijack human psychology?
If the only metric for survival is exponential financial growth and total algorithmic dominance, then yes, it is a doomed strategy. But the essay makes a profound counterargument. We are not algorithms. We are human beings.
We have souls.
We do. And while outrage might successfully capture our attention and generate profit for a tech platform, it actively degrades our spirit. It burns out our nervous systems. Wonder, on the other hand, is not a growth hack. It is a biological and spiritual necessity.
Wonder asks less of the nervous system and more of the imagination.
Exactly. When you sit quietly in a room listening to a complex story, or when you read a challenging book, you are not being optimized for engagement. You are participating in one of humanity's oldest, most vital forms of leisure. And this is where the essay does some really heavy philosophical lifting. It fundamentally redefines the word leisure for the modern reader.
This redefinition is crucial because we usually equate leisure with just turning our brains completely off.
Right, checking out.
Yeah. We think leisure is collapsing on the couch after a hard day of work and mindlessly scrolling through a social media feed, or binge watching a reality show for 4 hours until we fall asleep. We view leisure as passive consumption, basically idleness.
But the author, drawing on a much older philosophical tradition, specifically the ideas of the German philosopher Joseph Pieper, argues that true leisure is the exact opposite of idleness.
That blew my mind.
It's so counterintuitive. Idleness is a state of distraction. True leisure requires intense, active focus. The essay defines leisure as attention freely given to things worth contemplating.
Attention freely given. That's the key. You aren't being manipulated by a notification ping or an autoplay feature. You are actively choosing to focus.
Okay.
And you are focusing on things worth contemplating.
Not just garbage.
Right, and the text explicitly lists what those things are. Books, music, friendship, deep conversation, the appreciation of beauty, and my personal favorite on the list, questions without immediate practical application.
That last one is so subversive in a utilitarian society.
Oh, completely.
We are trained from childhood that every single action must have an ROI, a return on investment. You read a book to learn a skill so you can get a promotion. You talk to a person at a party to network for a career opportunity. You exercise to optimize your health metrics.
It's exhausting.
It is. But true leisure is engaging with something simply because it is inherently good, beautiful, or true. It has no practical application. It won't increase your salary, and it won't optimize your workflow.
And the essay points out that the most meaningful moments inside the physical station on Commercial Street emerged from exactly this kind of non-utilitarian attention. A long, winding conversation with a college student about a century-old novel, reading a thoughtful email from an Australian listener, an engineer in Ohio explaining the dignity of a rescued drill press.
None of these activities produced measurable efficiencies.
No. They didn't boost the town's GDP. They couldn't be packaged and sold to advertisers.
But, as the text so poignantly concludes, all of those deeply human interactions contributed to the kind of life people quietly long for.
The kind of life people quietly long for. Man, that phrase is the emotional anchor of this entire exploration. Beneath all our frantic optimizing, beneath all the scrolling and the outrage and the endless content consumption, there is this quiet, persistent longing in all of us to simply exist in a space that doesn't demand anything from us.
A space where we can just be.
Yes, a space where we can wonder and learn and connect without being monetized.
That shared, quiet longing is the ultimate counterforce to the algorithmic isolation we discussed at the beginning. And the author brings all of these threads together so brilliantly in the outro of the essay, returning us to the physical setting to ground all this high-minded philosophy in reality.
The imagery in the final paragraphs is incredibly cinematic. We are back on Commercial Street, but hours have passed. It is now approaching midnight. The summer rain has finally stopped. The street is completely quiet.
Everyone's gone home.
Yeah. The puddles are just sitting there glistening in the cracks between the old bricks. The Fox Theater marquee has been turned off. Whatever laughter was coming from the local pub down the street has completely faded away. The courthouse clock is just patiently, quietly ticking away the hours in the dark.
It is the ultimate picture of a world at rest. The utilitarian demands of the daytime are completely gone. But inside that little narrow storefront, the lights are still on. A story from decades ago is playing through the studio monitors.
And as we look at that glowing red on-air sign in the window, the essay subtly pulls the camera back. It zooms way out to show us the truly global scope of this incredibly intimate physical space.
It's a great transition.
Somewhere across the Atlantic Ocean, that man in Yorkshire is awake in the dark, listening to the voices. Somewhere in Australia, the sun is just coming up, and a listener is starting their day with the broadcast. A truck driver is crossing a desolate state line on an interstate highway. A university student is up late studying. A widower is sitting alone in a quiet house, letting the steady voice on the radio act as a buffer against the silence.
They are all connected to this one little lit room in Kansas, and the author delivers the final, defining insight about this disparate group of people. The remarkable thing is not the internet technology that allows the audio to reach them.
Right.
The digital plumbing is impressive, sure, but it's just plumbing. The truly remarkable thing is the shared human affection that makes the connection meaningful. The text delivers this incredible line, "No algorithm had instructed them to gather."
That is the ultimate triumph over the modern attention economy. They were not clustered into a demographic group by a machine learning model. Their data wasn't scraped to force them into a targeted community so they could be sold ads.
They arrived independently.
Yes. They were drawn together by their own free will, united by a shared love for stories, a thirst for deep ideas, and the lingering conviction that wonder is not a luxury, but an absolute necessity for human survival.
It completely redefines what a place actually is. From a purely physical standpoint, the station is tiny. It's just a narrow storefront, a wooden desk, a microphone, and some mismatched bookshelves. But as the text concludes, places are not measured solely by their square footage.
No.
Some places occupy far larger territories than any physical map can record. They take up residence in our memory and in our imagination. They become landmarks not because of their architecture, but because of what happens inside them.
The little station on Commercial Street has become one of those landmarks. And as the essay closes, the rain has stopped, the small town is fast asleep, but that red on-air light is still glowing over the door. The microphone is sitting on the desk, waiting for whatever tomorrow brings. The door remains unlocked.
The invitation is perpetually open. Come in, stay a while, you don't have to buy anything. There is still wonder here.
It is a profound summation. In an age of endless, hyper-optimized, disposable content, we are ultimately starved for real companionship. We are starved for the kind of true leisure that asks us to contemplate beautiful things. And we are desperately looking for spaces, whether they are physical or digital, that are willing to keep the light on for our imaginations when it feels like the rest of the world has gone dark.
It challenges every listener to evaluate how they are spending their finite time on this earth.
It really does. And that is exactly where I want to leave you today. Take a hard look at your own daily routines, the physical spaces you inhabit, and the media you consume. Are you simply trading your most valuable asset, your attention, for disposable content? Are you just feeding the algorithmic assemble line because it's easy?
Because it's frictionless.
Right. Or are you actively preserving the ideas, the stories, and the spaces you love through your own intentional affection? What does it look like in your own life to be the person keeping the light on for someone else? Think about that tonight. We will see you on the next Deep Dive.